Do you ever wonder what happened to your friends from high school? I mean, you were so close. You laughed together, you cried together, you shared some of the best years of your lives together. And yet, somehow through life, you just lost touch. Now it's time to relive those moments once again. Introducing the podcast that takes you back in time to the place where it all began. This is Class Reunion. We're bringing you all the gossip, secrets, and scandals from your high school days that you won't want to miss. Join us as we catch up with old classmates and dive into the wildest stories from our high school days. From those legendary parties to the infamous cliques, we're spilling all the tea on who's who and what really went down. So grab a seat, turn your volume up, and get ready for a trip down memory lane. Class Reunion, the podcast that reunites us all.
You are in for a treat today, my friends. Welcome back to another Class Reunion episode with JC Whitelaw. He's hilarious. We have so much to talk about. This could very well be a two-part episode. We'll know at the end, but it's unscripted and it's going to be fun. So let's just dive into it. There's a lot going on in this storyline, so buckle up and just bear with us because we're not going to make it anything strict. We're going to just have a really good time. It's Sunday. JC has his coffee. I have my water. We're just going to kick back and have a really good time, mostly because he's a recording artist. And so all of his stories are very music related, which is cool. And I can't wait to dive into that. And we're just going to have a really good time. I have said 100 times on all of my podcasts, and we just mentioned it, that the best, most authentic part of my conversations are when I connect with people on the phone. So we're going to try and duplicate it because we spoke for what, 2.5 hours? 2 hours?
I couldn't believe it how long we had spoken. It didn't feel like that at all, but we spoke for a while.
Thank God. Yeah. So yeah, I was 38 when we started, and no, but we had such a good time, and those are such genuine, heartfelt conversations. I just don't do it or record it that way because, sometimes people tend to go off the rails a little bit. Then everyone wants to listen to it and say, take that out and take that out. So we got all the bad stuff out of the way that we wouldn't say on a podcast. And so JC is a multi-talented, unfaceted person. He has great stories. And so what I really want to do is start with the musical side. So we went to high school together, but where you took off in your music career is interesting. And then we're going to go to your family, and we'll go to the school and high school and your house and where you grew up and all that, because that's also very interesting. I'm telling you, it just doesn't matter if you know JC or not. The story is incredible. So, but let's have some fun and go down memory lane of music and how you really found it to be your calling and you wanted to become a recording artist.
My parents were kind of progressive in their thinking, and though they were married, they definitely had two different lives in the sense of wants and needs and moving. And that was just kind of normal to me. Like most of the things that I was exposed to as a kid and a young adult was out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
For like my friends in school, right? Their lives were just different than mine. And that I suppose that made me have a open mind, but also having artistic tendencies or bents, it just was normal. So whatever for me. Dad was working a bunch out of England. He had really progressed in his career in a really short period of time and was doing a lot of work in London. And I'd see him maybe every couple of months, and he would come up and see us. And I was living in North Ontario at the time. And a place called Halliburton Highlands, which funnily enough, it's an influx of Scottish community moved to northern Canada.
I didn't know that either. Okay.
Yeah, and all the names of the places are all named after highlands, like as you know, like and whatever. It's all named after something, right? Dad would always bring back the stack of records, right? He would go to the record stores in London and just pick out like the top 20 of the top of the pops and bring them home from my sister, who was a big music fan, and she's 5 years older than me. So we bring those back for her, but I was the one who was like diving into those at a really young age. I was fascinated with music then. Like I knew something was like really special. Those years and those being able to hear that stuff, and I realized that that's where all my production wants and needs came from. Were how did they make that sound? How does a record player work out with that needle in that groove? How do you get? It was like voodoo. amazing voodoo, but like it turned me on so much and I would just loved it. And the sound of guitars, like through the stereo, like just totally mesmerized me. Songs mesmerized me. How come
the storytelling,
the whole shebang? So, and the records that were coming home were of an era in which singer-songwriters were a big deal. Rock and roll bands were a big deal. They were the pop act. So I was really lucky to we were really lucky to come up in an era of some real brilliance in recording artist era. Or of that era. You got David Bowie, you've got the Beatles, you've got the Rolling Stones, you've got Cat Stevens, Traffic, Steve Winwood, Dave Mason, and then all the other fun little pop things that went on that were really Neil Diamond, Carole King. I mean,
Tapestry was my favorite album.
You can go down the list of the artists that came from that period.
Yeah.
James Taylor. I could go on for days.
And they did end up recording, but they weren't auto-tuned. They weren't, such a genuine sound.
It was real talent without all the studio trickery, which is not my thing.
Yeah.
I came from old school,
love it.
You sing and you play music. You sit in front of a microphone and you play. And if it sucks, then you either redo it or don't do it. That's not the music business now. That is there isn't even a music business. It's a corporation. They make marshmallows. They're sweet and they're fluffy and they taste good, but there is like no substance to me.
That's a really good way of saying it.
Or cotton candy. It's great, but it doesn't have any sustainability.
Longevity is important. I just saw Stevie Nicks.
Fleetwood Mac. I got a great story about them. My dad was on tour with them.
We've got so many stories. And she was a storyteller, right? So she's singing these music songs that we knew, but she's sharing the stories and the outfits. And she's explaining why she had that shawl. She was in such a cool time period as well. But I will tell you that voice at 75.
Still kicking.
You could hear pin drop. You can't fake that. And then the Doobie Brothers I saw, better than I remember. I mean, most of these people aren't on drugs and alcohol when they're performing anymore. So
I am. Got to keep that going.
But, when you're 70s, you might want to back down. But even the Doobie Brothers, I was like, oh my God, this is going on 3 hours and they're still kicking it and haven't even covered all their hits. So longevity is what I'm saying is these people can still put on, the Eagles are coming. Like there's just so many cool concerts that are coming where that music is still excellent and relevant.
Right. It is.
You're not going to get that with Soulja Boy.
And here I'll let you in on another bitch that I have is about music in general is our generation tends to be so latched into the things we grew up with, which is great and all nostalgic and very cool. And there's still artists that are relevant in the sense of they can still play and they can still sing and they can still work and they love doing their thing and they're doing that. The problem with our gen is that we don't search out new things that are coming up, and maybe we shouldn't. Maybe that's
keep our perspective.
It's their time, but as far as though I've done massive concerts and hundreds of opening slots for massive artists, to get them interested in what we were trying to do is still relevant. Doesn't matter. In other words, you're going to a club in Florida, you're going to go see the Allman Brothers cover band. You're not going to go watch somebody else who you're not familiar with because it's just not that way. So that's because there's really great music out there of people of my ilk who aren't ultra famous, aren't ultra whatever, but they're still valid songwriter, singer things, rock and roll bands. They don't know that exists. And that's hard for people at my age to come to terms with, in the sense of still wanting to be a relevant artist and play music, but it's hard to get people butts in the seats. And that's at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. You got to get people to come and check out your thing. It's difficult to continue in that realm. And I kind of figured that out when the internet started, that was going to be the way things were going to go. Not that I had some grand vision, because if I had, I would have invested better in Google and Apple. Looking back at it now, it's more of just a realization of it's their time and they get to do what they do. And I just wish it had a little more substance.
And I think, good or bad, with our generation, you had the nostalgic artists that you're talking about. Then Gen X created music.
Yep.
Privately, really. I mean, if you talk about us being silent generation, We loved it. We built it. We recorded it, but we didn't embrace the social media to the degree.
Well, there just
Well,
wasn't.
no, but even now, you could resurge, but do you want to go on TikTok? Do you want to go in places like that will reach more people again? Because that is the next generation of, they took away all of the sounds on TikTok. I forget who the artist, the group that owned all the rights to these musicians. Okay. So like Beyonce, Taylor Swift, all those people are banned now from being used on TikTok. But TikTok loves originality. They like you to use their platform. They don't want you to upload from, Instagram or anything. They want you to use that app. They want you to upload. And they also want you to put and dub in new artists. Some of these people, whether they need, and that's the other thing, did they earn the spot? Did they, but if it's catching on and people love that music, all of a sudden now they know John Smith, and John Smith never would have been identified. So it's like a love-hate with this whole world.
That's brand new news to me. And I'm going to research that for sure, in the sense of, you
could put so much out there, JC.
Yeah. And that's just me not understanding how.
But that's what I'm saying. You were doing it at a time period, which was the love of music. And there was that limbo of like internet. Yeah. And why would you want to be years ago in this social media world? But now that it's here.
At that age, that's what I equated with success was popularity. Mm-hmm. I know that to be different now, and that's when I stopped becoming a musician and a poser to an actual recording artist. And then that's if I'd had a chance to play it all over again, I probably would have made different decisions. But I was concerned about when those offers came and what they were asking from us as far as a group or our royalty payment stream, and it just seemed really unfair. And I thought, well, why can't we just do this on our own?
Yes.
And it's like, well, because you don't have the reach. And looking back on it now, probably should have made that deal or 2 or 3, but I didn't. I was silly. Now I'm sitting back on the rights of a pretty massive catalog.
I know you do.
So it's okay, but I'll leave something for my kids to fight over. So,
but we talked about this because we talked about Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie, and Queen, and we talked about that whole movie was a whole thing about you sell yourself to the devil, though. All of a sudden, you're having to crank out music you don't believe in, and I think that's why you can't go back and say what I should have, because it really was at the time a deal with the devil. It was
to some degree. I mean, for us at the offers we were given, we were worried about our ownership or publishing, whether they could take our song and use it for anything. And that if we had signed those deals, they would have had rights to say, we're taking your thing and we're going to sell a car with it. We're going to sell beer with it.
Yes.
And at the time we were a little high on our horses, thinking like, well, wait, we want to have a say. If you're going to start promoting a beer company, we might have issue with that. And they're like, well, you won't, because you're just going to do it. And I suppose looking back, it would have been nice to have a song in a beer commercial, because everybody would have heard it and everybody would have bought it, because that's how it goes. And even understanding sales and marketing from that's where my dad ended up in his career. And even understanding that was how it was. It was about sales. It wasn't about the art. It was about sales. And if we had done that, maybe we would have had a little more success in the sense of financial stability to continue on to what we were doing. At the time, we also were worried that, well, what if this is the only song we'll ever get? You know what I mean? It was always, God, can we write another song? Now, how do you tell a 20-something, it's okay, man, you're going to develop. Everything is going to be cool. You're going to get better. Mm-hmm. When you're 22 thinking you're the shit, when you're not. You don't know that, but you do when you get older. So I suppose it sounds a little sour grape-ish, but with the way the trend of how, and then the death of basically the music industry, because towards, I mean, the 80s still had great stuff going on and great artists being produced, and it sounded, modern, and it was our gen that were into that stuff. But by the 90s, it was full-blown corporate greed at that point. And
I would even say the 80s. I can't say I was
yeah,
a fan of the 80s.
well, there's some great music that came out in the 80s. I mean, yeah, you saw the corporate machine taking over, but
Yeah, I
you were
think of
still
George
getting
Michael and Madonna. No offense, I'm just saying that
you were
was
still
not.
getting great music though. You were still there's, and that's even, I look back on Madonna. There was some stuff there of substance, not the whole thing,
Yeah.
but it was a culture choice.
It was a culture choice. It wasn't that she knew how to sing.
Terrible singer,
Yeah.
but
I know she's from Michigan, but come on, carry a tune.
she's not a great singer, but she's a great performer.
Correct.
Right. So, pushed the boundaries and made it all fun. And believe me, I don't own a Madonna record, but I understand her art. It's a different, it's a visual thing. It's
Listen,
different.
I had pearls and I had the whole thing.
And it's like Eddie Van Halen inspired like a whole era of guitar players of doing the, which I could never do. That was huge monumental change in culture and music and things as going down that pathway.
So how would you direct us, our age, to pause and look at music from your generation?
I would say we're very used to having it spoon fed to us of what matters, right? Through commercialization and what you watch on television or what you hear in movies, or because radio's dead too, right? I mean, it's all podcasts. It's all Spotify. Right. It's all somebody delivering you something that they think you want to hear.
Oh, I'm agreeing.
And what I think, and it's hard for us to do, is to actually go on a journey, search for it. But most people don't have the time for that. They don't want to go, okay,
I want to start the movement. I want to start the movement.
Start local. See what's going on in the clubs that are around.
I have a lot of you're right. Yeah, there's a lot of local
music
people.
Things, and just and if they're out there doing their thing, whether they're younger than you or older than you or whatever, go check it out. Go for the experience. Yeah. Don't try to keep growing or learning from hearing different things rather than something you're very familiar with. So I'm not saying it's not cool to be nostalgic or dig on the things that we love. If the Beatles were on tour, I'd go see them.
No, JC, here we talked for 2 hours. We did not have this discussion.
Right.
And I am learning just like you right at the moment as we're pontificating. And I have to say, you're 100% correct. We have been, as Gen X, supposedly, I'm just using the label, so stuck in the wanting to support the artists that we grew up with, which is great. I know nothing between the 90s after. I mean, unless you have kids and you have to listen to the stupid rap songs and stuff like that. But I didn't listen to my own music. I didn't continue my own musical journey. Going back to records, when you were talking about all that stuff, it's true. I remember my beanbag chair in the basement with my turntable, and I played all of my siblings' albums, which is why my genre, my era is so large. And I just closed my eyes and I was there in my own story, right? It was like my audiobook at the time.
Correct.
We didn't have that carried on because then it was radio and then it was downloading, which, mixtapes was the closest thing we got to and still wanting to create. And then life happened and we just didn't carry it on. And that's sad.
Because we get busy and we get older and it's harder, we got a lot of responsibilities as parents and having jobs and doing what we got to do. And you tend to get lost in that. You got to make time for art. You got to go to your art gallery. You got to put on a pair of headphones and listen to something and remember, and not just listen to what
the world out.
What new. You know what I mean? Go look for something new. Just
Love
to
that.
It just makes you grow. And if we're not growing, we're just kind of taking up space. It took me a long time to figure that one out.
When you discovered you wanted to be a full-time artist, it was before you got married, right? You were already full-time in the business.
A musician. I was definitely a musician. I was learning how to be an artist. I suppose is like I was going to school. As soon as I left high school, I started playing in rock bands in clubs. and went through that, which was my college, was my learning the business of music, and still, learning as a guitar player and a songwriter, like that whole, it was like 15 years of that, just trying to figure out where I was going.
The story with Tracy Lawrence, I just want to hang on one second.
Oh God, yeah. There's that one.
Were you, I want to do chronological. Were you married yet then, or is this one of the stories?
No, I was
that's
still...
where it's cool. So you're young, you're, learning the business, you're rubbing elbows with incredible people like you do. In I think we had a lot of exposure to those folks then. And some of it also had to do with your dad being in advertising in Detroit, Metro Detroit.
Sure.
But you also have a very cool story about Tracy Lawrence where you were in Nashville, correct?
Correct. So the first band that I had got some real notoriety with was a band from here, Michigan. Was a band called Ashcan Van Gogh. And we had kind of done our run as far as trying to get to the next level. It was very complicated. There were 3 singer-songwriters in the group, but that's what made it kind of fabulous. And we're still all pals and everything's cool. We're all still alive too, which is also kind of a blessing, because we've kind of reunited and done some stuff over the last few years, which has been loads of fun and great times. That band breaks up. I make my first solo record, or the first JC Whitelaw record, and
which has got to be incredible feeling.
It was well, it was really fun. But though a lot of pressure, because I missed my mates, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's not a band chemistry when you live, breathe, and trust your mates. It's you against the rest of the world. And when you lose that inner support system, that puts you off, But you grow from it, but that's all good. But I remember being really frightened about it. But I moved forward. We've recorded everything up here in Michigan, though we decided I wanted to mix the album down in Nashville, because there was a console that I wanted to work on, and brought my 2 mates who were helping me with the record in production. We were Woodland Digital, which actually Neil Young did Harvest in. So, they did. They did all kinds of records, but that was one that, when I walked in, I had no idea that Neil had done that, and I'm a big Neil Young fan.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We were there for 2 weeks, a week and a half, something like that. We leave the studio, we head back to the hotel room. It's like late. It's probably 2:00 maybe. So we go back to the hotel or motel, not hotel.
Because it's I'll have to put up the picture. It's like a Shoney's?
Yeah, it was the Shoney's. Yeah, right,
it was a no-tell motel. Remember that?
Yeah, definitely. And there were all kinds of touring acts living out of that place too, because there was 7 tour buses.
Yeah.
Because that's how you made money. You went out and you worked your ass off, and that's how you did it. So nonetheless, we're in the show. And we're sitting in the room, and we're on the 2nd floor, and all of a sudden we're listening to the playback, and all we hear is bang, 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 bang.
Which I shouldn't laugh, but I had to scare the crap out of you.
Oh no, we definitely jumped, and Jenny goes running into the back of the bathroom and hides in the bathtub. I go ducking, and so does my other producer friend Gerard. We both ducked down onto the floor because it sounded like it was coming right out the window.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy shit, you got to check this out. And Gerard's like, that sounded really violent. Something's really bad. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever. So a minute maybe passes, maybe 30 seconds. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Fact is, I'm like, I got to go see what's going on. So I creep open the door, and I come out, and
it's so bad. I have to know what's going on.
Yeah, I got to know. If we're in danger and we need to get the hell out of here, because we're stuck in rats in a trap. There's no other exit. And we're on the 2nd floor, and I'm like, look, there's nothing going on the balcony. And I look over the balcony, and I look down, and right beneath me is a guy sprawled out with a bunch of bunch of wounds.
Tracy Lawrence.
And who knew? I didn't know. And actually, Tracy Lawrence was he hadn't even produced his first record. He was trying to get a deal in Nashville. He actually became him about a year and a half, 2 years later. He recovered. And
he did. Yes.
He did. He recovered, and we were lucky.
Because you called 911.
Well, somebody else would have done it too.
I don't care. It's a good story. You helped save his life.
The part that scared me was when I went down to go see if I could help, and because there was no one around.
Right.
But then there were people down on the first floor that were obviously making the same calls that I was doing. And I'm there, and I saw the people walking away from him when I walked out onto the balcony. And I saw one of them turn around and look up at me and saw that I saw them. And that was the scary part. But they jumped in their car and they took off. So I go then downstairs to see if I can help somehow. Mm-hmm. And as I'm walking up towards them, the car comes flying back towards us, or me. And as that's happening, I'm like, oh, shit, this is going to be trouble. Mm-hmm. And just as they're flying up on me on the main floor in the parking lot, the cops come whipping around the corner, and then they bolt off and they take off. And I'm like, go get them.
And Tracy just acknowledged it. So he had it was 31, just a couple years ago, he did an article that he referenced that story and how he was with a friend of his who happened to be female, not anything.
That's right.
And he was really trying to protect her. So that was an area that a lot of people wanted to rob those that were the artists that were staying in that building.
It's true.
And so they came through to attempt to rob him, but then he wanted her to escape. And so it was the fact that he was fighting for her to, get off the scene that they came back, turned around and shot him, I think 5 times.
Yeah, he was hit.
How you survived that?
He didn't hit anything vital.
Well, country gods were looking down on him because...
Sure, those country artists, they could have taken 150 rounds and they would have been fine.
Probably happens on a Friday night.
The funnier story was about 3 months later, I get a call from an attorney firm, or a bunch of lawyers in Nashville, that are suing Shoney's for not having proper security on...
If you look at the building, I mean...
And this is Nashville. This is people open carry is not, they're all looking like cowboys, right?
Yeah, it's not.
And so they are. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what I saw. And I replied to them and they said, oh, they wouldn't return my call because I was going to probably not say what their client said. And then just about a year after that happened, he releases his first album.
I think it's so cool. It's a really cool story.
How'd you pay for that one, Tracy?
Yeah, right. Suddenly,
we do what we got to do. I thought it was kind of, wow, man, what a story.
So guitars.
Yeah.
Yes, we talk about art, and instruments are also art.
Correct.
And so how you came about finding the ones that you liked, who you got them from, and who also wanted your guitar.
Okay, that's a good one. Always, obviously, from a very young age, fascinated with guitar sounds.
Yes,
and obviously with everything that I was listening to, that was like the main thing of those songs. Got my first guitar at 11 or 12. My dad bought it at a place called Manny's Music in New York, which is like Eric Clapton bought his guitars from Manny's. I mean, all the guys.
Is it still there?
No, it's all gone. It's all gone. But that was a big deal. And so my very first guitar, which I still own, was my first guitar. And as soon as my dad gave that to me, I think it was for Christmas, maybe. And I never stopped. From that period. And my sister had a guitar, but it wasn't an electric guitar. Mm-hmm. And I always wanted an electric guitar from age of probably 5. So got that. Completely fascinated, started to learn. I didn't really...
Were you by ear or
I never took a lesson. I just started putting my hand...
Stop.
No, I swear. It was weird. But I wish I had, because I probably would have saved me a lot of struggle.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But when I was, I'd go, I'd try to put my finger here.
You said you were going to play for me, so.
Yeah, you won't be able to hear it. But it was all discovering, right? Or how does it work when you're putting your hands on a fretboard? And
I don't know. I think that's actually, what do I want to say? More creative. I get that you probably wanted to polish it after that, but I think just feeling it and learning and knowing sounds, you're not being dictated like you have to have this chord, you have to have this chord. It's self-discovery.
It definitely made it sound more original. I know that as I listen to how I play guitar and how other people play guitar. I don't play guitar like other people.
Yeah.
I play it more. I mean, that's kind of pompous to say like that, but I can hear it's like I can recognize my sound and what I play, and it sounds like me. It doesn't sound like Jimmy Page. It doesn't sound like Eric Clapton. It just sounds like me. Obviously those were influences, but but I was never sitting back trying to learn how they did it. I wanted to learn how to, I don't know, stupid, but it worked out in the long run, I think. That started the guitar bug. And then all of a sudden I'd start visiting music stores and then seeing other instruments. My first guitar was kind of musicians will understand this and I'll try to keep it simple, is my first guitar is kind of like, it's based on a Stratocaster, but a hybrid, which is like what Jimi Hendrix played. That's a Stratocaster. That's what he played. This was a hybrid of that, but started to learn about other instruments. I learned about Les Pauls, Gibsons. I learned about Telecasters. It started the whole journey on learning about what these instruments are and
how unique they are.
Yeah, and they all are unique to one another. They all do different things, and they all sound differently. And
the rarity behind each of them.
And well, back in the day, there wasn't really a vintage market. I mean, there's sort of, but it was a very small circle of people that were into learning about this. Like the holy grail of Gibson Les Pauls is the 1960 to 1958 to 1960 Les Pauls. Only a couple of thousand of them. But in that era of music, or in that era, and the wood that they were using, there's a lot of speculation on how that maple was actually cured through the old trees in Michigan with the Ice Age and all that. It's like Stradivarius kind of vibe. Also a very valuable instrument. But back in the 70s, you could buy a 1959 Les Paul for about $1,400. Now they're worth $500,000.
It's crazy. I know.
I mean, it is crazy. I was definitely had the guitar bug. So I started finding guitars that the first thing that mattered to me, I'd always want a secondhand guitar. I didn't want brand new guitars. I wanted guitars that had some love in them already and already seen the stage and already worked out their bits.
Their newness, like new shoes.
Was really fortunate to come across some amazing instruments for a very reasonable price at that era that I could afford, and started a collection of those things. Now that I'm 57 years old and I bought these guitars in my early 20s, turns out it was a good investment. I never
went into it with that.
No, it was the instrument is, when I touch it, it's literally speaks to me because how it resonates and against my body and what it feels like in my hands. And it's a whole very personal thing.
Which is the music community. You all feel that way.
Yeah, sure. And certain eras of certain instruments, which I happen to be really lucky about, I would come across and be like, oh my God, this feels so good. I need to have this. And then go play 9 gigs and bring all the money to the music store and say, here. And that was also a time in which we were working a lot and playing. So I was able to do that. One of my favorite stories, and I think this is the one you're talking about, is I got a call from our management. Pine Knob needed an opening act for Cheap Trick. And Cheap Trick is a really one of my favorite bands from when I was a teenager. Like when I first heard that was one of my favorite groups. And all my musician friends from high school knew that I was a nut for Cheap Trick at the time. So, fast forward 20 years, or pretty close, we got the call to open for them. And I'm like, oh man, this is going to be so cool. Like, talk about full circle. Because Rick really influenced me a bunch. And actually, he influenced my guitar collecting because he's a big guitar collector.
I was also,
big guitar collector.
Correct.
And that's kind of what started the bug with me. Like I said, I did a lot of concerts in the opening slot capacity.
Yes, that's cool because we grew up sitting on that hill. So how cool JC Whitelaw, were playing there. Like, that's really cool. In those
big venues. We're in our dressing room. I'm all giddy because it's Cheap Trick.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in the dressing room, and all of a sudden Rick Nielsen bangs in, and he's very
gregarious or whatever.
Loads of fun. And he comes in and goes, hey, welcome, thanks for doing the show, and it's going to be great. And we're like, yay, it's great. Now, and the drummer in our band was actually a pretty big cheese in his era. So Rick knew Johnny B, our drummer. So they were like, hey, how you doing? All of a sudden, everything's cool. And after the hellos is all done, Rick Nielsen looks at me and says, you're the guitar player? I said, yeah. And he goes, come on with me. And I was like, okay. So he then brings us over to his side of their dressing rooms or their tuning room, and there's his cases of guitars, and Rick takes like 30 guitars on the road with him when he plays, right? He's got 30 different guitars, and they're all awesome.
Right.
And I know most of them because I'm a fan, right? But I'm playing it.
Cool.
Thanks, whatever. Yeah. So he starts pulling out guitars out of his thing. He goes, I really like your Les Paul, because he saw it at Soundchecker and it's sitting on the stage. And he goes, I'd really like to trade you for that. And I was like, okay, let's talk. So he starts pulling out these vintage instruments that some of them are beat to hell, but they're still amazing instruments. And he's like, do you like this one? And I'm like, yeah, that's nice. What, And he goes, well, how about this? And he starts pulling out, and he pulls out another. He must have went through like 5 different guitars. And I'm like, God, he really wants my guitar. Because he's handing me guitars that I recognize. And I'm like, and he's like, and he's looking at the cases. He goes, well, what do you want that you'd be interested in trading? And I'll say, I'll take that Checkerboard Explorer, which is his like signature guitar. If you ever see Rick Nielsen, Checkerboard Explorer, it's a Hamer. It's not even a Gibson. It's a copy of a Gibson. He's like, I can't give you that. And I was like,
that's it.
And he's like, you're an idiot. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And he goes, but I get it.
Yeah.
And he was like, I totally get it. It's all fun. I'm like, come check it out. Come play it.
I thought it was so cool that he wanted it. And I think it's even cooler that you didn't give it up.
I would have given it up if you'd given me that checkerboard.
Right. But I mean, so your stakes were high. Like, you know what I mean? I like that. Let's also fast forward to our mutual friend, Leslie, who is, I just had her on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. For those of you that listen, she's in Hidden Hills and
a beautiful person. She's just
and she was
always loved her back in high school. And I wasn't really connected with a lot of people in high school. I had a small little clique, and it wasn't for not wanting to be a part of. I did want to be a part of things, but I was just weird.
We were all weird. There were,
but there were certain people that I didn't feel that way at all with. And Leslie Roby was one of those people. Like,
she's a light. She
was just so kind. And we shared a theater interest for one. So that obviously was there, but we sang in choir.
Wasn't that sad that she
sang in choir together too. I love her. I love that.
I know. And that's where it's interesting that we all walked around with smiles on our faces, and sometimes there was so much pain behind it, but she just was a little cherub. She was just always, and I always thought she was in theater, which is why so going back to like what you think, and we're all caught in our own bullshit. I really thought she was, because those were her friends. And how sad that
I didn't know that about her.
I didn't either. I thought she was in it,
Yeah, I can't believe that they did that.
Oh, that just kills me, because
it's tragic. Yeah, that's life-changing.
Yes.
And to lose to have that snatched away.
Yeah.
Though I don't know. I mean, obviously, that's her story, and that's her journey. It's, there's ways to go change that around, but to have that kind of snatched away.
Well, I think she did partially when she was in that whole improv training group. That was ballsy, and I thought that was so cool.
Well, she was skilled. She's
so skilled. Yeah.
She had chops, even and that's, I recognized talent when I was younger too. Yeah. And like Henry Howe. I recognized that guy was a super talented individual, and you've had him on your program, and that was so great to see that and to see Henry. And I've been in contact with him on and off through the years, mostly through Facebook, but incredible talents that were a part of our era.
So talk about your guitar pick story.
Yeah, no. So Leslie, this was after my family tragedy, which we'll touch on a little later, but Leslie reaches out and says, hey, give me your address. And I was like, that's weird. She goes, no, I just want your, so I'm like, cool, here you go. And she sends me a bag of Elliot Easton's guitar picks, because they'd had a party. He did a thing where it's Hidden Hills Fiesta. It was like their thing. So like, I don't know if you can hear.
Of course. They have their own neighborhood logo.
Right. Yes. And he does guitar pick, right? But these are like this is what he uses when he plays, which is actually a celluloid guitar pick. And not only that, it's a different size than what I usually use. So I think, oh, okay, that's so cute, and how nice of her to do that. And I start playing with it, and actually I started playing with them, and now so you can't get these kind of guitar picks anymore. And all of a sudden I'm like, God damn it. Cause it's like, it changed
Why don't they make them?
It's the material's different. They don't use celluloid, at least they're going through a drought of it or something, but it really changed my choices, and it changed the weight. And it really made a big difference in my guitar playing over the last, 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I was working on a record called Hammered, which was with the new group that I'm playing with the Disciples. I sent her a copy, and I sent her to give one to Elliot because he had changed my thing. And he listened to it. And he got in touch through Leslie. He said, sent me a really nice note and another bag of his of his guitar picks. And I'm like, okay, so I got enough to get me through at least the next couple of years, which is so kind.
Yes.
I was telling her on this record, I gave her a credit on this new record that I'm working. I've given her a credit on my album because of that connection.
See.
And I had that song I sent you, which is actually a new single for this record that's coming out. I sent you a rough not a rough. It's finished. It's just not mastered yet. And I sent it to her, and I said, Leslie, this song is so Elliot. I'll send you the basic tracks. Have him cut a guitar solo on it.
Shut up.
No, I did. I asked her, and she's like, he was going through some stuff, and she never asked him. But I was.
You don't know till you ask, right?
Hell no. I know that when he hears that song,
correct. He'll know what to put in there. Yeah.
Because I did a very Elliot Easton kind of guitar solo on this song, and when he hears it, he's going to go, "That should be me. I should be playing."
So this is what you were recording also last weekend. When will it be done?
I've released 2 songs from this record's called Woolly Mammoth and Other Assorted Sweets.
Yeah.
And it will be, the way I'm doing music now is I'm just releasing singles. I've got 14 songs that I've collectively made for this album. I've released 2 already. One's called Deception. You can find that online. Lucky. I can find that online, and this will be the 3rd and 4th singles, and the 3rd one is called Stop, and the 4th one's called It's Happening Here. So those 2 songs will be released in the next month, probably.
Okay.
And I'll be finishing the mixes for the rest of the album over the next month as well, but I'm going to release them every couple of months.
See, you have adapted. You're rocking.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, I love the single.
Yeah, and it's nothing new. That's what they did in the 50s and 60s. It was, believe me, you've probably got more listeners than I do at this point in my career. So I'm not worried about it. I'm not doing it for any other reason than I just have to do it. I just make music and I put it out, and something happens with it. That's great. I mean, I'm being a little more proactive, trying to get it landed in my music right now is really cinematic, and I would love to marry that with another and partner with somebody who knows and gets that and do the soundtrack for their vision. That's
really cool.
That's what I'm really after. That's what I'm really kind of focused on is getting this used, because it's pretty good. It's pretty good. And
it goes back to where I was saying, and I'm going to leave with that because I think that's a very cool way to end where your musical journey is now. But it goes back to me saying, sitting in the beanbag chair with my headphones on, I created my own story.
Yep.
So how cool, I get what you're saying, is that would be neat to take the music and put it with something that is visual, because that's all we ever did back in the day, is we just went into a world of our own.
And people don't, the majority of people don't make music the way I make music anymore. They don't. Right. They do it on loops. They do it on. It's very reliant upon technology, which is fine because to each his own, or different strokes for different folks, as they say. I like to do it old school, which is get in a room with a bunch of mates, learn the song, play the song, record the song, mix the song, release the song, and not doctor it all up and make it sound like computers. This is this comes from a very organic place. So I'm actually sitting on a pretty massive catalog that if somebody was actually interested in revisiting that kind of music or that sound, then I've got a massive catalog for them to use as a soundtrack for their visions. So if they were doing something in that genre, so I see, because we're old enough now where we're seeing films that are about the 70s, and we see films and series about the 70s and 80s and 90s, and that's like old history now. So instead of just going and grabbing the pop song of that era, why not, there's a possibility where they may need something transition music from one scene to another that sounds like that era. And I am definitely dated in that world.
No, I think that's very cool. And offline, I'm going to give you a suggestion, but let's leave the musical part right here because I think that's beautiful. And I encourage everybody, I'll put some links, but JC Whitelaw is a fantastic artist. I know the music will be universal for a lot of our listeners. It's very, very good.
Thank you.
So thank you for sharing that part of who you are.
Cool.
And now we will go to the second half of JC Whitelaw as a child.
All right, friends, that's it for this episode of Class Reunion Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show, write us a review, and share this podcast with a friend. Until next time.